no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a we we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday Review, where we make sense of the news. Belize's only news review talk show. Well, bragging about it. Here at XTV, simulcasting on Com Radio, live streaming on YouTube, XTV Belize, and Facebook. XTV Belize, I'm the producer and host of Sunday Review, YaYa, Marin, Coleman. And in the house this morning, we have our dynamic, powerful, credible co-host from out of Trinidad and Tobago, Breddah Ako Matota. Good morning, Breddah Ako.
Good morning, Sister YaYa, and good morning to our listening audience. Wherever you are, I want to begin with a quote this morning because so much is happening in the world. So I wanted to just put some of the events that are happening in the world in context. Wars in Ukraine, wars in war in Iran, and so on. And I wanted to quote Fanon so that we can contextualize what is happening in the world. And Fanon said, to quote him from The Wretched of the Earth, "There are too many idiots in the world, and having said it, I have the burden of proving it." I think what has been happening, we don't need to prove anymore that there are idiots in a country that considers itself the greatest country. And also, I would like to quote another legend of the Caribbean, a historical figure, the great Jose Marti, who said that the U.S. is destined to plague all America, and he's talking about the wider America, with misery in the name of democracy. And so I think it's important that I use these two quotes to contextualize what is happening.
I agree, Breddah Ako. Our guest has not signed in yet, but we're expecting him to sign in. Until then, Breddah Ako, who I have dubbed our Caribbean correspondent, want to give away some news from around the Caribbean. And remember, Haiti and Cuba, Puerto Rico are a part of the Caribbean. And in 2025, Sunday Review, the focus for the population in the Caribbean, majority African people racialized as Black people, Indian people, indigenous people, and others. Caribbean correspondent. We made it off last Sunday. So I never get no live Sunday Review last Sunday. So we come back with a bang this Sunday.
Okay,
so sure, Breddah Ako.
Good morning again. The first report is out of Guyana, posted today actually, and the headline is "Shots Fired Outside Government Minister's Home." The article reads, "Several gunshots were fired late last night outside the residence of the Public Works Minister of Guyana, Wang Ejil. He told the Mirror Waves Online News that more than 15 spent shells were recovered from the scene. The motive for the shooting was not immediately clear. The Guyana Police Force did not respond to several queries about the incident in the Joint Media Services WhatsApp group. Saturday night shooting followed the June 1st, 2025 arson attack on a building owned by Mr. Edgel in Georgetown. The suspected arsonist was days later found at a city hospital where he was admitted for severe burns. Again, the Guyana Police Force has remained quiet on inquiries about that particular incident. So that's a very serious incident that has happened in Guyana. The other piece of news is from Haiti. The headline is 4 years after Haiti's president was killed, the investigation drags on. Not one suspect imprisoned in Haiti has faced trial after being charged in the killing of President Jovenel Moïse, who was gunned down at his home in the nation's capital nearly 4 years ago. Gang violence, death threats, and a crumbling judicial system have stalled an ongoing investigation defined by outbursts and tense exchanges between suspects and judges. In one case, the judge said, "You failed in your mission and you should be ashamed to declare yourself innocent." Judge Claude said in a booming voice as he stood and faced a Haitian police officer responsible for protecting the president, who was shot. So that is part of the situation in Haiti. Years after, it is still not resolved after the death of the president. And the other headline concerns Cuba, and it follows up on a report that we did a few weeks ago, in which the U.S. was trying to sabotage the whole medical brigades of the Cuban, and it has not stopped, and it continues. The headline is "A Letter Demanding Data on Cuban Medical Missions Roils the Caribbean and the Americas." An unusual request from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights about Cuban medical brigades is roiling and annoying countries in the Caribbean and the Americas. This unusual request indicates that the government of the U.S. wants to get information on the worldwide operation of the Cuban medical brigade. And it has, as I said previously, royal countries in the Caribbean. In a letter obtained by the Associated Press, the Commission asked members of the OAS, the Organization of American States, for details including whether they have an agreement with Cuba for medical missions, whether these workers have labor and union rights, and information about any labor complaints. This was an unprecedented move, according to officials from the Caribbean community, and it is a move that the Caribbean community finds deeply troubling. This is, again, an attempt by the United States to undermine and collapse the Cuban government, utilizing the same methodologies that they are currently using in Iran. In Jamaica, the headline is "Fatal Force." A recent poll indicated that Jamaicans believe police killings are excessive and not justified, especially among youth and elders. A surge in police shootings in Jamaica this year has stirred national debate, with more Jamaicans viewing the number of killings as excessive. Those who believe that the police are simply doing their job is significantly declining, and the population of Jamaica is very concerned about this, what they perceive to be the excessive police killings. This seems to be a pattern that is emerging throughout the Caribbean, in which police killings are occurring, it seems, randomly. And the same thing has happened in Trinidad and also, I think, in Barbados. The next headline is from Panama, and it says, "Panama suspends constitutional protections in the Northwest." And this is important because recently in the Caribbean, two governments, in dealing with policy failures, which has caused unemployment and other kinds of economic hardships, have implemented states of emergencies, mainly Jamaica and Guyana, and also Trinidad. And so it seems that this pattern is continuing throughout the region. So the headline is "Panama suspends constitutional protections in the Northwest after destructive protests." Panama has suspended constitutional protections for 5 days in its northwestern Bocas the Toro province after 2 months of protest, road blockages, and other kinds of behaviors. The constitutional protections denied, including the right to assemble and of free movement. For 5 days in the northwestern forest of the Toro began Friday, after 2 months of protests and road blockage turned into what the authorities considered destructive behavior. Presidential Minister Juan Carlos Oriac said in a news conference that the move would allow the government to re-establish order and rescue the province from radical groups. He said the damage caused overnight was unacceptable and did not represent legitimate protests. What began as nationwide protests against changes in the social security system morphed into people protesting at the local airport and the facilities at the banana giant Chiquita brands, which fired thousands of striking workers in the province last month. So as you can see, this began as a protest against the policies of Chiquita Banana. And what people have to understand, Chiquita has a history of meddling in the politics of the Caribbean. In fact, they were responsible on more than one occasion for the overthrow of governments in the Dominican Republic and in other parts of South and Central America. So this is a very important thing that is happening in Panama as we speak. And so I think this is the end of the news pieces that we'd like to have. Yes, this is the end of it. And for this week's review of the news.
Big thanks, Brother Ako. We have our guest with us. Welcome for the first time on Sunday Review. We have our brother Shabaka Kambon. He is from Trinidad and Tobago and is the director of the Caribbean Freedom Project. Founder and director. Morning, Brother Shabaka, and welcome. Your mic not on.
Unmute.
Yes, morning, brother, sister YaYa, and of course, brother Mutota, Uncle Mutota. How are you, Uncle Ako?
Good morning, my good brother. Good to see you.
I'm calling you uncle to distinguish myself in age.
I noticed too, you got a pretty dashiki. Welcome, brother. How are you being this morning?
Good, man. Good. I'm happy to join you here and to get a chance to touch.
Give thanks. The reason why, I don't know, Brother Ako, that the link since 2025 started, he has been the co-host of Sunday Review, and the focus is the Caribbean. Brother Ako has been the brother have a right for color uncle. This is our revolutionary brother. He look at Aki young, what they got yes, but I want to say that gray here. He earned every bit of it. And so he felt that it was absolutely critical for us to broaden the scope on the Caribbean and recognizing that the majority of the people in the Caribbean are African people racialized as Black people because of the enslavement, human trafficking, and the continued harm of colonialism, neo-colonialism, capitalism, and all the isms and schisms. So, anyways, in that I got one issue I call Brother Akon. He more likely will know some credible person for Halafa. So, Brother Akon know that at the door here protest today is day 292 in Belize. Since I've been doing this here protest, almost every calendar academic year, there's a new story of a Belizean student being discriminated against in schools. One, they're sent home from school for not following European hair policies. And two, they're told how them for wear their hair. In our 9-year period, Belize has 6 districts. We found most of those cases were African people racialized as Black people, some are othered. So in doing the research, we found that Angola in 2022 changed their hair policy, the first Caribbean country. Trinidad and Tobago in 2023 changed their hair policy. Puerto Rico in 2024 changed their hair law for within schools and employment in the private and public sector. So in doing research, I come across Brother Shabaka on YouTube. They talk about institutional racism. I say, aha. Plus, the organization that he founded has been active in saying, and I never think about it till I read the interview with Brother Shabaka sent for me. Having one law no mean that people will follow it. So because of years of mental enslavement, there's still violation of the here policy in Trinidad and Tobago. But anyway, Brother Shabaka, tell me a little bit about yourself because we don't know you. So tell me a little, whatever you feel comfortable share it with, tell me a little bit about yourself.
All right, all right. So I am a child of not just the Black Power generation, but the Black Power revolution. That Black Power generation is those people born in the 30s and 40s who demanded more from independence, through great personal sacrifice, with some of them paying the ultimate price to lay a foundation on which we could build a future. So a lot of the freedoms we enjoy across the region today is because of that wider generation. I'm talking now not just about the revolutionaries themselves who would have gone to jail, who would have been killed by the police and so on, but all those artists, activists, authors, writers, poets, etc., academics who helped to push, to undermine the continuation of colonialism in the independence period. And we have to remember that the great Frantz Fanon and the late Ngugi wa Thiong'o, he just passed away, and so on, they told us that colonialism wasn't just the political, military, and economic aspects, which we tend to those are the things we tend to consider or to think about when we think about colonialism. There was a whole infrastructure of ideas that justified the actions of colonialism, that created the racial hierarchies of colonialism, and so on. And what happened at independence was that we dealt with the economic, we tried to deal with the economic, the political matters, first of all, but we left the ideas in place in many different aspects. So I'm a child of that movement across the region, starting in the late 60s, going right up until Grenada in 1983 when Maurice Bishop was killed. That movement that ultimately resulted in the Grenada Revolution, and which gave us a different way to look at ourselves, to critique colonialism, and to advance our Caribbean civilization one step further. I'm a child of that struggle. My father, of course, is Kafra Kambon, second in command in the National Joint Action Committee, and my mother is also a revolutionary, one of the women leaders of the 1970 Black Power Revolution.
Big respect for the introduction, and I appreciate that you touched on. And Brother Akko, you could tell me, I don't know if anywhere in the Caribbean region, English speaking, French speaking, or other, if at the time of what we call flag and anthem independence, if there was any serious move for decolonization, for dismantle with mental enslavement, was there any, even if it never lasts, was there any, did the political leaders at the time, did they have the awareness to look at dismantling not only the physical infrastructures, but the mental? In Belize, like there's a church state school system that is still in place. I don't know if there was ever any move to dismantle these systems. Brother Akko?
No, there was no move by the political leadership to dismantle the system. There was a lot of sloganeering. So, for example, Eric Williams in Trinidad, when he came to power, one of his favorite statements was "Massa de done," which means the end of Massa. But when you looked at his policies, there were no policies that coincide with that rhetoric, and so that was part of the response of the leadership in the Caribbean. Now, one has to understand Caribbean politicians. They know exactly what to say when to evoke certain responses from the masses, and sometimes to put them to sleep. So at the ground level, there were people and organizations who were trying to decolonize the state or the society. And there are a number of them, debating groups and so on. When the independence leaders came to power, they co-opted a lot of these groups into their political parties, because CLR James, was for decades, fighting for decolonization, and others like him in other parts of the Caribbean. But the politicians captured the popular sentiment, captured the movements, but never implemented any policies of decolonization.
Mm-hmm.
Big point that, Brother Akko. Brother Kambon.
I would go one step further than Brother Akko, even to suggest that the first the independence leadership, those founding fathers, where it was Compton and St. Lucia, Williams, Manley, Barrow in Barbados, right across the board, they unwittingly extended what we call colonial epistemic violence in their efforts to try to create these pillars of learned people, literate and learned people for their new democracies. They expanded the school system across the board because, at the end of colonialism, 80% of the people across the Caribbean were functionally illiterate. Colonialism, for all the money that it had stolen and for all the credit we seem to give it in our discourse, it really had done nothing for us in terms of education. 80% of the people across the region were illiterate. And so we attempted to fix that when we got power, flag, as you call it, flag and anthem independence. And unwittingly, what we did in that process was we extended colonial epistemic violence. And when I say epistemic violence, I mean violence enacted on or through knowledge. A big part of what took place under colonialism was extended to that 80% of the people who it had not reached before. And so a lot of the backwardness that we see in our societies today, we have to take credit for it. A lot of it occurred, that violence occurred in the post-independence period. So we actually emerged from colonialism. Our illiteracy protected us to some extent in the colonial period, and it would have gotten worse in the post-colonial period. And of course, the Black Power revolutionaries, as Brother Matota points out, they did their work in opposition to these founding fathers.
I can't be the first one to tell you that there is no post-colonialism. We are still colonized. And one of the, so there are two things that showed up listening to both of you just now. One is the very real co-option of individuals, groups, and organizations, primarily by politicians and non-governmental organizations. One. Two is one of the reasons, and it's relevant, so I'm mentioning it. The organization I work with, which is the only Black media house in the region, Mandela newspaper, 55 years, Creme Radio, 35 years, the organization I lead, 29 years, XTV, 21 years. Why we do not and will never support CARICOM and the so-called 10-point plan. One, the enslavement of African people was legal by political leadership. So who for decide what will be the repair? The people and what they lead it. But what you just described just now, Brother Shabaka, is that you have one group of people in the Caribbean with colonial papers. I know them things that are an expert by every damn thing, are only them for talk, or only them for lead. And when you need them for lead, like intervening in a meaningful way with our sisters and brothers in IT, they're not there. So me personally, as an individual, as a community leader, I hold Belize politicians accountable, the government of Belize. I will CARICOM accountable for the failure with people. And so the group that we work with coming out of the UK, we look at planet repair. And it says exactly what you just said, Brother Shabaka. On the planet repair and African reparations, there's cognitive repair, there is reparatory, there's cognitive justice, reparatory justice, and environmental justice. And cognitive justice is critical because when you get 1 degree, that really want colonial mindset outlook at the world and education. That is not the only worldview available. There's always been, we are the first African people, indigenous people, there's no room for that. And so most of these people who are in leadership within political parties, within organizations such as CARICOM, are deeply mentally enslaved with colonial mindset and worldview and not open for hearing nothing else. How the hell?
So, sister, let me give you a little bit of pushback here. I think that what has happened is that, since independence, a lot of our academics have been doing the work, doing the research, writing the books, to deconstruct colonial myths, colonial narratives, and to reshape the mental space in the Caribbean. And it is those very academics who are leading in that area who are now involved in the reparatory justice movement. And they would have a difficult time as it is with some of the backward politicians across the region. And so I think that even while we must always look critically at the agendas that come out of academia, the agendas that come out of politics in the region, we also have to look, for areas that do advance our agenda to support those areas. So while I would not discourage you from looking critically at the 10-point plan or the work of the Caribbean Reparations Commission, I would not take an adversarial position. As I said, some people like Vereen Shepherd, Sir Hilary Beckles, Dr. Claudius Fergus, Dobreen Ahmad, all these people are involved in this movement who have already distinguished themselves in significant ways to demonstrate. Walter Rodney said before he passed away that we must always be distrustful of the Caribbean intellectual until they prove otherwise. I'm suggesting that some of these leaders in the reparations movement have already proven that they are on the side of the people. And so we have to I would suggest that I wouldn't discourage us from taking a critical approach, but I wouldn't want us to take an approach that would undermine anything that could advance our Caribbean civilization and our global African community.
Breddah, I'm not new to this. I chew to this. I don't tell you what I think. I tell you where I live, where I know, where I get evidence. We don't have stretch talking. I don't rate them people. No, some crumbs I might you, but I don't know people. When you study history. That's why the power of the people, and so if no other country, Belize is on the record from the organization I represent. We're constantly lash out the government of Belize and CARICOM and the 10-point plan. No, I don't match no words. I don't stretch no talking. Burn that out. Real talk. And like I said, we make sure we create evidence, having our own media house to substantiate the positions where we take. But anyways, we got into that conversation because we're looking at the point of so-called political independence. There was never any serious mindset, organizing, plan, action to decolonize our minds. So most of us are still mentally enslaved. And one of the biggest instruments of mental enslavement, and we got 3 minutes to the break, that was sensitive matter, but we need to talk about it. One big part of a mental enslavement that has led to self-hatred and discrimination of others is the Christian faith. So when you hear, I just want to give you an example, right? No, pick sense out of nonsense. How a man will come with one Sir Hillary, where the bloody hell he get his sir from? The very people who are enslaved. Brother, look, no one can start this man. So I just say, you can't just have lyrics. You have to live, especially in a private, when nobody don't know where, then only public. No. You have to be authentic and true to this. You have to answer to our creator, to we African ancestresses and ancestors who made the sacrifices, who are still protecting and guiding us to do this work. This is the real talk. So I really have I don't know why. I know hero worship or heroine worship. No, 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 no. I know. Smile and I make a know right now. Me, I don't know, friend. No, no, go so. Like, so you don't have to wonder about me. I
Okay.
don't rate you. Like, and I said this privately and publicly because of the wonderful we issue to brother. We not talk like we've. I don't know if we're free yet. I don't know what for publicly say, and that's the one of the issue we was in. We either the position we in right now. We not honestly say like, well, I know, well, me and brother Akko that company, so I know that, but brother, no, 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 no. I expect brother Akko for pull him and say, sister, yeah, yeah, and I have to humble myself and say, brother Shabaka could say, sister, and me, but if we can check each other like that and then watch and see the behavior change, brother, what we to do?
Yes. Sister, listen, I want to applaud you, and I think that you represent, the radical element of the people, which is really important to the struggle going forward. That kind of critical tone, that kind of holding our leadership, our academic and political leadership accountable, that is really important from our people. If you and organizations like yours and that tradition that I come out of, if we stop doing that kind of critical work, then we will not the region, this our Caribbean civilization will not advance the way we want it to. So I applaud that work. I also want to, for the benefit of your listeners, encourage everybody to learn about the doctrine of discovery. It will give credence to your critical view of the church and the role of religion in our history. The doctrine of discovery is the basis on which the whole colonial enterprise was established. It is something that we do not teach our children yet. Of course, it's the as I say, we are still purveyors of colonial epistemic violence in the education system. We did not address the content of the curricula at independence. And so we still leave these vacuums of information in the textbooks of children. Of course, all the academics have this information, the sir this and the professor this and that and the other. They know this stuff. For whatever reason, they can't seem to get it into the books. But the basis on which colonialism was established, whiteness and blackness, first class and second class citizenship around the world, genocide and enslavement, was something called the Doctrine of Discovery, a series of about 9 papal decrees from the 1440s right up to the 1490s. 1493, Inter Caetera was the last of that group of bulls, which established that non-Christian peoples had the right to invade, conquer, vanquish, enslave for perpetuity, take the resources of non-Christian peoples around the world. And until we have that discussion across the region, until we understand that's the basis on which this entire evil enterprise that we call colonialism was established, which we're still struggling to address the legacies of, I think and until the powers that be in the institutions that would be responsible for that violence come forward and are held accountable and apologize and understand the role that they played and work constructively in the post-independence period to address the issues that they left, I don't think we will really get to where we are going. But I see all this coming in our future. The 21st century is that century of reparations, that century of where we're going to confront our past in all kinds of ways that are going to be very interesting. And we are going to, according to Fanon, the world is waiting for something from us other than a nauseating mimicry of Europe, which he called an obscene caricature, to advance civilization one step further. That's going to happen in the 21st century, my sister.
I don't know how that will happen because before you could repair something, you have to stop the harm, and the harm continues every single day. The harm continues, so you can't get this repairing something when the harm continues. Go ahead, brother Akko, and then we're going to break.
I think it's important to highlight the point Brother Shabaka just made there, the doctrine of discovery. There is an appendage to that. I think it's called terra nullius, right? It's a Latin phrase in which basically translates to land without people. And it has been the doctrine, the philosophical, if you want to call it, engine, for whatever term, that was utilized in connection with this doctrine of discovery. There's an interesting book, it's called something of the Dispossessed. I don't remember the title at this point in time, but it dealt with how the different European colonizers came and claimed land as their own. So the Portuguese had one method, the Spaniards had one, the British like to plant hedges, the Portuguese would like to put markers, and the Spanish will issue an edict in the name of the king or queen, and so on. So these things are important, and I think it's an important point that in our curricula, it is not embedded in terms of understanding how we became the kinds of societies we became, right? So I think it's an important point to emphasize in relative to understanding this theory of the doctrine of discovery. And the church has played a critical role in initiating that doctrine.
And
We
Brother
definitely
Akul,
stretch stacking. We have to go to break. But at the beginning and the next half hour, we are stretch stacking. I agree, Brother Akko. We need to explore it some more.
Yes.
So people could really understand that this is all like history for a long time, that this have more impact in
And
our
how it
everyday
impacts
life.
us today. Yeah.
Especially when it comes to education. Is the education system in Trinidad and Tobago a church state system?
Yes.
yes, of course, yes.
You would say it would be so for the most of the Caribbean, right?
Yes, I'm going to tell you something shocking when we come back from break. I promise you.
All right, that's a good bit.
We're
Gonna
going to
stay
break
tuned.
new ground today on this program when we come back from the break.
Yes,
All right,
break
okay.
time.
All right, okay. All right. Okay.
Imagine getting rewards for your spending. Smart prepaid customers countrywide, it's time to level up with Smart Gains. Smart Gains are exclusive, limited time offers sent straight to your phone. We're talking irresistible rewards. You'll actually want extra credit, bonus data, and exclusive perks, all tailored to you. Because at Smart, we've always got your back. Don't miss out on rewards made just for you. Smart Gains, Smart Savings, Smart You. Smart, bringing people together.
I'm Randall Friesen and I manage Westville Produce, better known as Granny's Foods. That's our main brand. So we offer high quality grains, beans, rice, and we also offer corn chips made from 100% locally grown corn. We saw a need for high quality locally produced products. A lot of the best products are being exported, and we said, we need to keep some of the best products here in Belize rather than export everything. Atlantic Bank has helped us achieve our goals by providing the financing for us to be able to launch products faster than we would without the financing that they offer. We find that Atlantic Bank is very customer friendly, especially with small and medium-sized businesses. We find that Atlantic Bank is more than willing to go the extra mile. They try to understand your business. So when we go to Atlantic Bank with a certain need, we find that they try to develop a solution that will meet our specific need. I would encourage any small business owner to go to Atlantic Bank for their financial services. They're very friendly, and just overall, their service is excellent.
Come to Banquet, find your way. Engines roar at the break of day. Volvo outboard surf the waves. Castrol oil is what they crave. Live with power, feel the sound. Heavy machines shake the ground. Riding Honda, feeling proud. Rev it up and shout aloud. Feel the wind against your skin. Smell so wide, let's begin. At Banquet, where dreams ignite. Gear up, and let's take flight. Kohler's power runs our towns. JCB lifts heavy pounds. Find the tools to build your dreams. Banquet's got the best machines. Grip the wheel and never slip. Feel Feel the rush, it's time to trip. Every brand you know and love, Banquet fits you like a glove. Feel the wind against your skin, smell so wide, let's begin. At Banquet, where dreams ignite, gear up, then let's take flight.
Banquet, equipment, parts, service. We represent quality.
In 2024, the Belizean diaspora took over Los Angeles with the first ever Belize Diaspora Summit, and you know the only thing that could be ever better than that is to do it again. Belize Diaspora Summit 2.0. This time it takes place in the state of Florida, Fort Lauderdale Board Convention Center, July 10th, the 11th, the 12th. Belizeans from the diaspora, Belizeans from home in Belize, join together. Let's do it again. 3 days, government services, clinics, business displays, kitty corner, pop-up trivias, panel discussions. There will be highlights for business mixers. There will be a live performance of Racindio. Destiny Wagner is going to be there. There's going to be a live performance of Makobi. And you will have Immigration and Civil Rights Town Hall, special guest Kenneth Gibson, interview and book reading. There will be a wind-up reception, rhythms and rum. It's happening, Belize Diaspora 2.0, Florida, Fort Lauderdale Board Convention Center. Don't miss it.
Guatemala, this a VTA with a figure. Nobody Guatemala, this a VTA with a figure. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa.
The second segment of Sunday Review, Sister YaYa, we have Brother Akko, and we have our brother from Trinidad and Tobago, the Republic, Shabaka. Give me the shocking news, Brother Shabaka. You had with a wait during break. Tell me.
All right. So this is related to everything we are discussing right now. You know, Trinidad and the Caribbean in general, we tend to project ourselves as a space in the world that gives an example of how people can live together without racism, without discrimination, and so on. We of course exaggerate our own, anti-race credentials. Trinidad and Tobago, we have the notion of every creed and race find an equal place in our national anthem, and we are this land of one love and so on. You would think that in a country like ours, the person who organized the first desegregated school and desegregated church in the country, where children could learn together in the same classroom of different races, and people could worship together sitting alongside each other in the pews, that somebody like that would be honored and celebrated in a country that says it is the center of the world in terms of racial unity and so on. But I can tell you, and you could do this test, and Brother Akko could do this test, ask any Trinidadian who that person is, and nobody will be able to tell you. Ask any Trinidadian where that school was. You might even find it difficult to Google this information. Where that school and church were, they will not be able to tell you. Right? And that's because we only pay lip service to those ideals. We don't genuinely, do anything to promote them in the post-independence period. And we know now our academics across the region are increasingly beginning to use the word apartheid to describe the experience of Caribbean people between emancipation and independence. We live apartheid. In this country in 1970, across the region in the late 60s, people went out onto the streets because the degree of apartheid that had outlived colonialism into the independence period was too much for us to bear. That's what gave birth, that's what brought the Black Power generation to the fore. And so in Trinidad and Tobago today, the man who organized the first desegregated school and desegregated church, a man called Francis Breddah, has been completely erased from our history. And the church and school that occupied the space that was his personal land, which was taken over by the Catholic Church, no compensation to his family from what I could find in history books. that space does not even bear a plaque that remembers what he did in this country. And the man who most opposed him, who persecuted him to death, he died young from the pressure he was under back in the early 19th century when he established these revolutionary institutions, right? That man has a square, a street, a statue, a marble plaque in one cathedral, a statue in another, a cafe, streets, all named after him, all honored him. That man, one of the greatest white supremacists in this country's history, is none other than Governor Ralph Woodford. Woodford Square in the heart of Port of Spain. So it tells you that we have not yet, as a Caribbean people, and Trinidad is part of a larger region where the same thing exists across the board, we haven't yet really gone back and confronted the violence of our colonial past in any meaningful way to advance our Caribbean civilization. And the same thing would happen, when we talk about monuments, hair issue, color, skin color, employment, education, all of it is all related to the fact that we as a people have not confronted our violent colonial past. We have not heeded the words of Frantz Fanon, the great Martinican intellectual, who said, imperialism leaves behind germs of rot, which we must clinically detect and remove, not just from our land, but from our minds as well. We haven't digested those ideas.
I agree with you 100%. And from lived experience and studying, we cannot expect political leaders, or especially people in power and influence, especially the one with colonial papers, what I call degrees, to do that. It usually have to be people from within communities. But what if Mark and they want to put up, make a show a perfect example. They're usually people within communities with one level of anecdotal history or who has done some level of reading, who organize with sometimes leave it money, no money, for make that kind of changes. But I can tell you about the marker where people and put up.
So we did one marker about 3 years ago to highlight an event that took place in Rio Claro in 1937. And just as what Shabaka is saying there, Trinidad had a major anti-colonial uprising in the 1930s. So we focused on June 19th, which occurred in Faizabad, right? But 2 days later, in Rio Claro, where the area I live in, there was a mass protest there in which 5 people got killed and 14 were arrested. And that was suppressed for a number of years. Not even the labor movement, when I shared it with them, understood this was part of their history, you see? And so when we found it out, we raised some money over the last few years, and we did put on the marker about 3 years ago. So the marker is actually there now, right? Indicating that these people died and 14 people were shot. Interestingly enough, a woman, I think her name was something Charles, right? She was one of the women arrested at the event, and the magistrate, in a fit of rage and gender discrimination, said to her, "You want to be in man business? I'll show you what man would get." And gave her the stiffest sentence. He sentenced her like 14 months in prison for being part of the protest. So we have worked on that. The other thing we are looking at right now is we are working on trying to get a street renamed where the BP now, where their offices, they have a center in the Mira area. It is named after a slave owner called Beaumont, who was a South African who came to Mira on the plantations, the coconut plantation, and actually instituted a pass system. So we're trying to get that street renamed. Dr. Samaru, the late doctor, and I was working on it, and he has since passed. But the thing I mentioned to you that I've been working on for the last 2 or 3 years is to get a plaque to honor the memory of Edric Connor, who was a principal figure in the arts and culture in Trinidad and in the UK. Right? He was at one point in time the foremost Caribbean actor, possibly one of the foremost black actors in the world. He was on the same level with people like the singing guy who can't remember his name.
I know. I brother from the United States who sang.
Or no, the other one, the banana guy.
No, not Harry. No, Harry Belafonte is nowhere near. You're talking about his name is right there. But anyway, he was vilified by the US, and Edric Connor was on par with him. He acted in movies with some of the most famous white actors and actors, Robert Mitchum, Humphrey Bogart. If you ever saw this movie called The African Queen, he was in that movie, you know. And he has a park in his name there. It is a totally dilapidated condition. And so a couple of years ago, I had an event, and people were saying, who is Edric Connor? So when we explained who he was, the community itself was surprised. You know, so those are the things from a community perspective we are doing in that area. So we are hoping, we're hoping to do it this year, but we can't do it this year. But hopefully next year we might be able to get that plaque in his honor. But we felt this is important, right? These markers, these historical markers are very important. And this is not the first one we did. Actually, through our heritage organization, we did about 9 markers in the Rio Claro area, highlighting the importance of the train, the railway to that community. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, we did the one on highlighting what we call the tribute to the martyrs. We call it observing the massacre of the 5 workers and actually the 14 arrested. And the warden at the time, who they didn't want him named in the plaque, which I wanted, but because we had to work with the state, was a man called Knowles. He was the one who gave the order to fire the people, and his descendants are still alive in Trinidad.
And that's my point that I was making, that we cannot leave it up to the state and these organizations, because they oftentimes, too many times, don't genuinely work in the interest of our people. It wasn't, and I forget Sister Andai's, the point is to change the world. And she said one of the issue is the people that we invested in betrayed us. People that look like us, that came from us, that we thought would do differently than what the Europeans did, and they continue to betray us. So, for example, in 2014, our organization started to recognize African Emancipation Day. Leave bag of money, just people to build awareness. We did it 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Now, when we started in 2014, we were just building an awareness, and we thought we were the first people in Belize to recognize African Emancipation Day. As I've done no research, so 50 years after the legal chattel enslavement ended for people at the British colonies in 1888, one group of black people that Belize identified themselves as black people, gone before the governor house and recognized Emancipation Day. Now, all the years, the state have access to the archives, to everything. They never come out and tell me nothing. So we do it in the 8th year, in 2021. Now, when we started in 2014, we were just doing what mattered to us, recognizing our African ancestors. And in the 8th year, in 2021, the state makes it a public and bank holiday. Now, when we started in 2014, there was no way we could have imagined that. And that's why I tell people, know your purpose, trust the process. So for me, I want to always stay within communities, that people within communities have the solution to the challenges. And we, for the most part, we could trust ourselves, because they want in a leadership across the world, consistently, real way. So that's why it's up to the people now for gain the knowledge, partaking of conversations, dialogues based on an informed position, and the people that are the best authority because they live with the oppression every day. That for just make them able to organize and defend their best interests, and trust that we are the base of this pyramid. Once we organize, the top will crumble. But we have to believe that we can't leave it to other people for solve for we problems. And that's why for the Caribbean, it's important that we come together and have these dialogues. Yes, Brother Akko.
Yeah, I wanted to return to that point Brother Shabaka was making about the role the church plays in this whole process, which I think we were supposed to discuss after he released the information. And the doctrine of discovery, right? Which was not just a pure political doctrine, it actually had religious connotations, right? Because it was issued under one of the papal bulls, I think it was, which was canon law. So it's almost like this doctrine of discovery was divine law. And to some extent, those influences still exist in our society while we continue to ignore that historical reality. So I don't know whether Shabaka want to.
Yes, Brother Shabaka. And I'm glad you went back and doubled down on that point, Brother Akko. Brother Shabaka.
Okay, so let me just tie. I would like to tie everything we're discussing together here. Just to be clear, and also to congratulate Akko and his his group down in South for the work that they're doing there to remember our great ancestors and to mark the places of struggle and so on. That's really important. I want to say that across the Caribbean, that first group of leaders, which continues up to today, first of all, that Frantz Fanon told us that they would betray us. That was the next thing we did. Was not. It was designed that way. This was not. It wasn't an accident. It was organized that way. And one of the things that they did was to create a history for us, a historical narrative for us that basically started at independence, right? What in whatever little ways they went back into the past, it was to sort of prop up that narrative. And so a lot of our important history as Caribbean people was erased. All the, when you ask the average Caribbean person, who their heroes are, they're athletes, entertainers, and a few politicians. That's not an accident. It was organized that way. And there are two elements to it. One is what the British, for example, in our own context, did themselves. There was something called Operation Legacy that they enacted across the colonial world when they were pulling back from their empire. And in Operation Legacy, they went out and tried to destroy or to move out the information that we would have required to understand the violence that had happened to us. They took that information back to a place called Hyde Park in the UK. There's a huge building there where they keep all those files under lock and key. And the others they burnt. And of course, we know exactly what happened in our own context in Trinidad. They sent a note from the colonial office to our Governor General, Sir Solomon Hochoy, telling him to burn all the files. He sent a note back, which we've all intercepted, saying it would look bad if there's a huge bonfire in my house at the dawn of independence. So they sent a note back saying, take all the files, and they gave very specific instructions how to weight them, etc., how far into the Gulf of Paria to take them, and to bury them in the water in the Gulf of Paria. We've also found out exactly who was on that boat that took all our information out into the Gulf of Paria. And it turns out that one of the guys who was responsible for throwing away all that important information, which told the story of of the colonial violence that we experienced, which is so important for us to understand the challenges we face today and what we need to do to advance. One of the guys actually collected some of the material and gave it secretly to Dr. Eric Williams, which aided him in some of his writings and so on. So all that information we have. But just to say that all those people who would have, sacrificed sometimes with their lives for us to experience the freedoms we enjoy today have been erased from our past. In the context of Trinidad, our great J.J. Thomas, the great intellectual who wrote the book Fraudacity, Umzambo Lazar, the first African Trinidadian to take an African name, and his work, Edgar Murray Smith, all those people in the labor movement and so on.
Umzambo Lazar.
And so on.
Mzumba Lazar.
Muzumbo Lazar, Edgar Mari Smith, what's her name? That sister from Grenada, Elma Francois. And all these people have been either diminished or
Some said Vincent, actually.
erased from the consciousness of the people. And that does us a tremendous disservice. Because when our young people look up and they look for sources of inspiration, all these people who've exemplified the highest ideals in terms of intelligence, in terms of capacity, in terms of sacrifice for nation and for community, all of them have been disappeared. And the young people now only have entertainers, athletes, and these half-baked politicians that have led our country since independence, who Frantz Fanon said would betray us because of the context in which they emerged. So I think it's important for us to understand that past before we go back into other things.
Let me just support one thing Shabaka said here. And it's a quote from Fanon I have in front here. And I'm going to link it to something else. Fanon said, the unpreparedness of the educated classes, the lack of practical links between them and the mass of the people, their laziness, and let it be said, their cowardice at the decisive moment of the struggle will give rise to tragic mishaps. That's a quote from Fanon Wretched of you, right? And when you look at it, this is what has happened, not just in Trinidad. There was a president of Trinidad, I think our first female president. When asked who her heroes were, she said Winston Churchill, an arch racist who killed millions of people in India, and Eugenia Charles, a seller. And she was the president of the republic, and those are her two heroes. So you understand that? You understand? So this is and C.L.R. James also mentioned it in his book in Party Politics in the Caribbean, when he spoke about the Caribbean elites as a group of people without any destiny, any purpose, all willing to serve colonization. You know,
but I could moments like this, I could totally support you saying, people in the Caribbean need to come together and dialogue and let it be known. I don't make for work with anybody. I don't talk to anybody. I don't beg friend. But moments like these are why it's so important for us to have their kind of conversations to say how systemic it is. Now, what we talk about today, that's systemic racism. But let's let the backdrop for that. So in the last half hour, Brother Shabaka want to talk more about systemic racism as it relates to hair discrimination specifically in the last half hour. But break time, stay tuned.
All right.
Whether the job is big or small, every super handy dad needs the right tools. And at Brothers Habet and Habet, we have what you need. Enjoy super savings all June, like 15% off all power tools and hand tools, 25% off track car batteries, Eureka Vats, and Pisaforte towels, 25% off Penta Decon and discontinued colors, 30% off Valspar, and 40% off Dutch Boy paints. Plus, we're giving away $200 to 6 lucky super handy dads. Every $50 you spend gets you a chance to win. So this year, give Dad his best gift yet from Brothers Habet and Habet. Come in or reach out today. Happy Father's Day to all super handy dads.
I'm Randall Friesen and I manage Westwell Produce, better known as Granny's Foods. That's our main brand. So we offer high quality grains, beans, rice, and we also offer corn chips made from 100% locally grown corn. We saw a need for high quality, locally produced products. A lot of the best products are being exported, and we said, we need to keep some of the best products here in Belize rather than export everything. Atlantic Bank has helped us achieve our goals by providing the financing for us to be able to launch products faster than we would without the financing that they offer. We find that Atlantic Bank is very customer friendly, especially with small and medium-sized businesses. We find that Atlantic Bank is more than willing to go the extra mile. They try to understand your business. So when we go to Atlantic Bank with a certain need, we find that they try to develop a solution that will meet our specific need. I would encourage any small business owner to go to Atlantic Bank for their financial services. They're very friendly. and just overall, their service is excellent.
Let's take a journey through the core functions of the Social Security Board. It all starts with registering as an insured person, employer, or self-employed individual. Sign up for a portal account to manage your Social Security information online. Just provide accurate information and click Create. This will give you access to a range of services and benefits. Next, your contribution, along with investments and other income, are collected and distributed into 3 funds. This ensures that the SSB fund is securely utilized to support various benefit programs. The SSB is committed to providing essential benefits such as sickness, maternity, injury, and pension. These benefits are paid out to eligible individuals as a part of the Social Security coverage. We help you navigate through life's challenges with financial security. Annual surplus accumulates to grow the fund each year. This surplus is invested into various industries, contributing to the growth and development of our nation. With each passing year, the fund continues to grow due to the annual surplus and interest revenue earned from prudent investments. This surplus, along with reserves, helps to bolster the SSB fund and provide a safety net for those in need. We've arrived at the end of our journey to better understanding how the SSB works. We remain committed to serving you and building a secure future for all Belizeans.
Tired of appliances that just don't last? Appliances that just can't keep up? It's time for a change. GE Appliances delivers reliability, innovation, and performance you can trust. The decision is easy. Don't settle for less. Choose quality, choose reliability, choose GE.
Guatemala, this time we nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time my name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Belize City area. Guatemala, this time we nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time my name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This time we don't fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time we don't fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time my name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots.
To the last half hour of Sunday Review with Sister YaYa, Brother Akko, and our guest from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Brother Shabaka Kambon. Okay, Brother Shabaka. Speed wrong. Get it all out right now.
Before Brother Shabaka goes on, I wanted to tell the audience, remember the name Paul Robeson. And the book I was trying to remember, which is a very important book for me to read, is called Ceremonies of Possession by Patricia Seed. It's a very, very important book about how the colonizers used ceremonies to dispossess people of their land and to possess it. It's called Ceremonies of Possession.
Big thanks to X. Evan excited for remember I said the name of Paul Robeson. I call till we find it for tell. Big thanks, X.
Paul Robeson, yes.
All right, go ahead,
so that's what I wanted to say before.
Yes, so very quickly before we get into this here issue, just to tie everything together for those students of history, those people who are passionate about knowledge and learning and listening to this program and trying to figure out what we're talking about here. The basis on which colonization, the whole colonial project was established was the doctrine of discovery, and therefore it was religious. The very first, for the 100 or first 200 years of colonialism, the basis on which it operated was the distinction between Christians and non-Christians. Colonialism was the project of Christendom, the kingdom of Christ. The first project was religious. It then moved to reason during the era of enlightenment. And that's when you had people coming up with all kinds of bizarre theories about race, just off the top of their heads, dividing the world into 4 races and 6 races and attributing these qualities to this race and that race. These were all just ideas off the top of their head, and many times not based on any kind of scientific or objective criteria. And then at the end of the second half of the 19th century, it turned to science, or what we would call pseudoscience. And that was the period when you had the introduction of something called eugenics, the whole based on the false science, which attributed superior qualities to Europeans and inferior qualities to Africans, and a whole host hierarchy in between. You had they developed something called eugenics, which was the science of racial breeding. And many people don't know this, but African people were actually earmarked for extinction at the beginning of the 20th century. Because according to the science of the day, we were an inferior race, and the superior races would gradually take us over in land, in territory, etc., and we would gradually die out. Just like in a state of nature, according to Darwin's idea, survival of the fittest. These were the kinds of ideas that animated the greatest political leaders, scientists, academics, and so on at the beginning of the 20th century. Only when it came to World War II, and that science had come back around to haunt Europeans in the Holocaust, because it was the very same science that had been applied to African people and other peoples of the world, other darker races of the world, since the late 19th century. That science now came back around and affected Europe in the Holocaust, that they delegitimized it. And what we see today in Trump's America and in the right-wing Europe is a re-emergence of the science of eugenics under different names. The racial, they have new words that they're using and new catchwords and so on that they're using for it. But this pseudoscience of racial inferiority of African people is being discussed all over the place. Now, how does this relate to the subject for this next half an hour? Because it was in that very same period of religious, rational, and scientific inferiority that the attitudes to black hair were developed. Our hair was considered, everything, how Europe did things is that they chose themselves as what they call the prototypic Adamic man, the first man. Of course, we know Europeans were not the first human beings on the planet at all. It was Africans. If there's any claim to what a human being should look like, it would be the people who first emerged as human beings, first Homo sapiens sapien. But that's a whole different conversation. What happened was that they made themselves the standard bearers of beauty and intelligence and everything else. And as far away as you moved from their ideal, you were considered to be ugly, evil, etc., 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 based on nothing else than the fact that they were the ideal. That's the basis on which African hair becomes so problematic. Now, when we go back into our own Caribbean thing, we would realize that in that post-slavery period, the period of apartheid, hair was a major struggle for us in the Caribbean. We have the work of a Scottish physician who came to Trinidad, who actually wrote about what he saw in the 1920s. And he concludes that African women would spend every cent that they had. That's those African women who were living in Port of Spain and had some means of surviving in some version of the middle class, on trying to fix their hair. And he observed that the real social class in the Caribbean was not so much on the skin color. You could actually have slightly browner skin, but if your hair was closer to that European ideal, you would actually have a higher rank, right? So he said that hair was the defining factor for social status in the Caribbean, and this is in the 1920s. Just after he published his account, Marcus Garvey said that we should remove the kinks from our mind, not our hair. But Marcus was actually speaking against the grain. Even in his own organization across the world, blacks had already imbibed that sense. We had personally imbibed that sense that there was something wrong with our hair, that it was inferior, it was ugly. And so even in the products that we produce to try to straighten and make our hair closely resemble European hair in the early 20th century, some of our commercials, if you go back and look at those early commercials, they speak about their products as actually important to racial uplift. So in the early 20th century, the idea was that if enough of us could straighten our hair and get rid of that ugly mat on top of our heads, it would actually help racial uplift. And of course, Garvey stood against that, but he was standing against the tide at that time. You move forward now to the 1960s, and you have, Fanon publishing Wretched of the Earth. And in that book, he talks about, and Black Skin, White Masks. And so he analyzes and presents us with a clear understanding of our own self-hatred, and he critiques the kind of violence we experienced in the colonial period. The Black Power generation, they imbibe the works of Fanon, they imbibe the ideas of Martin Luther King, who said we shouldn't be ashamed of our hair, Malcolm X, who said in 1962, who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? He said that in 1962, and he encouraged us to challenge that self-hate. So all our thinkers and illuminaries and leaders in those 60s, joined Garvey. Coming out of Garvey, they projected, they challenged these colonial ideals. So by 1970, the late 60s, you have the emergence of the Afro in the Black Power movement. And that then gives way to more natural styles. But of course, what happens is that the natural hair becomes associated with the political project known as the Black Power movement. And so as the governments of the region begin to suppress that movement, as Grenada falls victim, falls apart, implodes, and so on. We have, the suppression of the cultural iconography of Black Power, and people begin to shirk away from the natural hair, the afros, etc. But of course, not everybody. The society, there remains a core that, from Akuma Tota's generation, your generation, who've remained, strong and steadfast in this thing. And you guys unite, y'all are connected, y'all connect the thread to the movement that starts in the late 1990s, where knowledge begins to emerge about the dangers of chemical processing. People begin to realize that they're affecting the reproductive health of African women. We have the highest rate of fibroids in the world, and they're related to the chemical issues and so on that we're struggling with. We have scalp problems, and all kinds of other things that there's a huge cost. There was analysis done in that period as well of the cost to African women of having to conform to a European aesthetic, a European beauty standard. And all that information started to feed into that generation in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And by 2010, you have a new natural hair movement now that is detached from the political movement of the 70s, and that just wants to rescue African hair. Now, let me say why I use the term rescue. Colonialism branded every single aspect of the lives of non-white people as negative. Every aspect. What we have done since independence is try to rescue our foods, our religions, our forms of dress, our forms of our worldviews, every aspect of ourselves. We've had to rescue it from the censure, from the contempt of colonialism. Tragically, and just to put this into context, we just didn't finish the job with African hair. So African hair remained, within we fought a good fight in 1970. You could see the work that was done, but we didn't finish the job. And so today in the 2020s and 21st century, we have children in Barbados, in Jamaica, in Trinidad, in Belize, in all the countries across the region who are suffering discrimination there. And when they become adults and they go into the job market, they're suffering discrimination because of the way their hair grows out of their heads. And the people doing the discrimination look like me and you. And we think we're doing it for their own good. We're trying to help them. But what we're in fact doing is we are reifying Europe, the standards of colonialism. As I said, we didn't do enough to address that. We're projecting colonial epistemic violence onto a new generation, and it is tragic. And I'll give you one example. I'll stop after giving this one example of how bad things are. A few years ago, I was at a international meeting in Cartagena, Colombia, which included the ministers of education and other ministers from several Caribbean countries. And I think Belize's education minister was in that meeting. St. Lucia was there. Jamaica was there. And it was in September, the beginning of the school term. And one day in that meeting, all the ministers of education's telephones started to ring at the same time. And they were all jumping up from the round table and running out of the room to take calls and so on. I was sitting next to one minister. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Boy, we're having hell in our country right now with kids being sent home and turned back for their natural hair." And I talked to and it was the same thing all across the board in Jamaica, in Belize, here, there, everywhere, right? And shortly after that, you had Sister Kentish Rogers. She was the Minister of Education in Anguilla. Right. She was the one who said, "This is enough." Somebody turned to her one day and she said, they said to her, they said, "You have locks. How do you feel knowing that students with your hairstyle will be kicked out of school?" And she thought about it for a second and said, "This is ridiculous." And to quote her, she said, she changed the policy and said, "This change in policy will allow students to wear their afros, locks, braids, and other protective hairstyles associated with their racial and cultural identity." And of course, what she did, being revolutionary, we must applaud her. We must remember her. Honorable Deanne Kentish Rogers. Please let us never forget this important sister. What she did went against the grain, not just in the Caribbean, but across the African world, because similar protests were taking place in South Africa, in countries in West Africa and East Africa, in the United States of America and the United Kingdom. Everywhere that our young women had realized that the dangers of the chemical relaxers and so on, were trying to, gradually embrace their natural hair, they were confronted by a system that said that natural hair is ugly, it's unkempt, it's uncouth, it's not professional, etc., etc., etc. And they had to fight that. That's my introduction.
Thanks, brother. You do it. Brother Akko, I can get your 2 cents.
Well, I listened to him. I'm very proud of him, actually. I was listening to him, very proud. We have to be careful with history. And one of the things that have been utilized a lot, a historical figure that have been utilized a lot is Madam C.J. Walker, right, in the U.S., who made a fortune on selling Black women cosmetics and and other kinds of products that undermined their naturalness. And so she's lionized and celebrated a lot, but she actually did a lot of harm, even though she was a successful business person, And I think we need to, at times put these in context, so that people understand, yes, she was successful financially, but there were cultural things that, wasn't correct. And this is, I tell people in the modern era that there are some people who are very progressive politically, but very backward culturally. you know. And this and Shabaka made a point earlier that reminded me of when he said we were called cultural nationalists. And when we raised certain issues about race in the society, those who consider themselves following the class lines, we were dividing the working class, you know, until they read Fanon, not Fanon, until they read Aimé Césaire's Return to the Source, they never understood that the anti-colonial struggle and the decolonization struggle, both things played a part. The class analysis is very important. And I have always said this, that as a member of NJAC, we may have not understood clearly the class analysis, which is very important, you know, and we may have de-emphasized it as an analysis, but and that's one of our contradictions or errors, if you want to call it that. But on the other hand, those who consider themselves Marxists, who denigrated and ridiculed what we did in terms of the cultural trust and emphasize on culture, also did this the country a disservice. Because now I am looking at a report from Jamaica, and I had to ask a friend of mine from Jamaica if this was true. Thousands of people line up at KFC, ready to break down KFC because in Jamaica, because KFC had a sale. I mean, you know, you also look at across the Caribbean, every young man across the English-speaking Caribbean, from Jamaica to Trinidad, all of them, they pass on their butt imitating this American gangster culture. And that has nothing to do with the class analysis. That's a cultural problem. So it is very important that we emphasize the role of culture. Brother Shabaka referred to the fact that our foods were denigrated. Yes, it was. This is one of the things we did in the National Joint Action Committee. We would have we had something called the Cultural Trust, and we'd have these rallies, and we would make sure that the foods, the traditional foods, would be displayed and sold, like what we call pone and bake and so on. I remember a very classic case. We had invited Sparrow to come to a rally to sing, and so we had this pre-meeting with him before the event. And he looked at us and said, "Listen, fellas, I know you like to drink Moby and so on. I like no whiskey. Make sure you have some whiskey." Because we had this reputation for all our events having Moby. Correct. Which was an additional. He said, "Look, I know you like only Moby, but I need some whiskey." And so that was the kind of thing, and I think people don't understand the importance of this cultural trust and the need for culture to be central to any process of decolonization. I know you always laugh when I said we are not post-colonial, which is what the academics said. Because we are not post-colonial. For you to be post-colonial, you have to go through a process of decolonization, which we never did. Which we never did. It would have meant changing our education system, changing our approaches to economics, right? Because our system is still connected, right, to the metropolitan economic system. Still, it was sugarcane, today it is oil and whatever. And so we have to embark on a serious process of decolonization and not be caught up in these, what I call fanciful rhetoric about post-colonial and post-colonial. We are not post-colonial. We are neo-colonial, right? And from the neo-colonial stage, we have to move to a process of decolonization.
Yes, and brother, let me just, because I don't know how much time we have left, I think I have to make a very, very important point about the achievements we've made in Trinidad and Tobago. We pushed the government in 2023 to enact legislation. And we were very clear that, and they didn't enact legislation. What they did was they set out a bunch of regulations for schools to follow. And of course, that is a huge advance on what pertains in places like Belize and other parts of the Caribbean. But that's not good enough. As the article I wrote clearly stipulates, regulations are no match for racist beliefs. And the idea of good hair and bad hair is so ingrained in the Caribbean psyche that what we need to accompany any regulations or legislation is a program, a national program across, or even a regional program to address the discriminatory ideas that the society holds when it comes to African hair. And this is not just a matter of aesthetics. This is not a frivolous matter. This is a question of health, education, access, and long-term success. If we don't do this, if we don't move beyond simple regulations to and this is not something revolutionary. If you go to the United Kingdom and you look at the work that they have done in the 2010s, in the early 2020s, every change that they have made to protect African people from hair discrimination, they've added an element, an educational element to that. They understand that this is something that this is an opportunity to transform the society in a meaningful way. Regulations by themselves don't do that. In the United States of America, you look at the Crown Act, starting in California, 2019, and moving to all these different states across the country, from New York to all the other states. You will find that anywhere it was enacted by a legislature that was serious about transformation, it had an educational component attached to it. They put money so that there could be the conversations that could help people. They could create material, literature, online resources to help teachers, parents, etc., navigate this new environment. Because the regulations aren't going to change hundreds of years of brainwashing, which tells us that there's something inherently wrong with African hair. And so we made a terrible error in Trinidad and Tobago by not doing that. The PNM government, we publicly call them out for it. They're now out of office. We're going to try again with the current regime. But we want to, anywhere else, like in Belize, where you all are inspired by the work that we've done, we're going to help you guys to build in that educational component from the start in terms of your demands. You don't just want regulations. They must sponsor a program of transformation for the consciousness of the people across the society. Last point I want to raise here before we go to any other questions, Brother Matoto, when it comes to this question of the left in the Caribbean, I think it's very important for us to understand that at the beginning of the 20th century, right up until George Weeks, all the different elements of the left, that is the women's movement, the three major elements, the women's movement, the workers' movement, and the racial justice movement, they were all one in the Caribbean. There was no distinction between them. Elmer Francois is all those three things rolled into one right up to George Weeks. What happens in the period of the late 60s is that Caribbean intellectuals travel to Eastern Europe to study. They travel to Western Europe and North America to study. And they imbibe a version of Marxism that suggests that the current Marxism of the day, that these other movements are somehow antithetical to their goals, that are undermining the goals of the workers' movement. And so they come back to the Caribbean and with these divisive ideas. But we understood, Fanon understood, Césaire understood, Rodney understood that that orthodoxy didn't fit into our own context, and that our working class was the wretched of the earth, was the oppressed in terms of racial justice, and that race was fundamental to their class oppression. And so these are things that we would need to have other programs to discuss how they work out, how we move forward. I think the real promise is in the work of people like President Hugo Chavez, who developed the concept of the New Left, where he brought all these elements together, because a similar thing had happened to indigenous people. Their fight for racial justice was also deemed to be a problematic to the working class. And because of leaders like Chavez and Lula and Evo Morales, you find that the working class has embraced the indigenous struggle in the same way it should embrace the struggle for African racial justice. And all these movements have to understand their fundamentally anti-imperialist character if they're going to really be revolutionary. They're anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist character. So I think I just wanted to add that, brother. But
Yeah, and one thing I would add to support you, that is why CLFJ broke with the American Communist Party. It broke on the race issue because they were trying to not emphasize the race issue in the American Communist Party when he was there, and that's how he broke with them because he said you can't tell the African American that he must stick to this class analysis when he's a victim of racial discrimination. Just wanted to add that.
Big respect, brothers. I am very, 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 and our African ancestors happy with this morning for the scope of the conversation what we had, and for definitely and I appreciate what you said, Brother Shabaka, about willing to be an ally with UEF to guide us to learn from own experience when, as it relates to the hair policy change, and that legislation alone now change the mindset and the practice of people throughout the country. And this is one perfect link for Mekwa, Angola, Trinidad and Tobago, Puerto Rico, Belize link. I don't know of any other country in the Caribbean where one group of people actively to challenge the state on the human rights violation when it comes to sending the children a home, so they're denied education, and then the discrimination about the hair. So that's definitely something I want to follow up on for this conversation. Big thanks again, brother Shabaka Kambon from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and he is the founder and director of the Caribbean Freedom Project, and their mantra is confronting the past to free the future. Big thanks, brother.
And sister, let me just say that we are committed to working with you on this project in Belize. So I am hoping that in the next month, we're going to launch nationally in Belize a project to end hair discrimination in that country, because we have in our research we've seen many times where the problem has cropped up in Belize, and we know that the times when it makes national and international news are the exceptions. The majority of cases go unreported in these situations. And so I'm really looking forward to you launching that project and for us being able to give all forms of support to the work that you're doing, to work with you to transform that reality in Belize.
It's day 292 since we launched it in Belize. So definitely we're looking for allies to collaborate with in the Caribbean, and Trinidad and Tobago, example of people who held their state accountable, but then still see growing pains. There are things we can learn from it. And then have a final thought within the Caribbean, which other Caribbean countries, because there could be other Caribbean countries that people that do the work, but we just don't hear about it, or we don't know about it. But for make them connections, it really matters to have that kind of solidarity. And what I love about it, it's not by the state, it's not by people that people within the I support bottom up, or even people who stay within communities. Even you could be a scholar activist. I could rate a scholar activist because I don't say we don't need the research. The empirical research does help. But when you act disconnected, like you can't talk your local language anymore, you have to coin at you're gonna talk to me. So big thanks, brother Shabaka Kambon, brother Ako. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
We will repeat at 1:30 today. 1:30. Why? Because we got a big program at 4 o'clock Belize time, but 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So I holla for everybody for tuning in to XTV, and you'll see this information per XTV Belize YouTube page, XTV Belize Facebook page. And it's because, Brother Ako, hurry and plug it. Thanks to Christy. Christy done the show the flyer. Tell them what I have this afternoon, Brother Ako.
Oh, this evening we have an event at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in observance of the UN, the United Nations World Refugee Day. We have speakers from Haiti and from the Haiti Action Committee. We have a speaker from the Farabundo Martin Liberation Front from El Salvador. It's very important given the gulag that Bukele is running in El Salvador. We have a brother from Bonaire, in which the Dutch is trying to displace the people of Bonaire. We have someone from the Barbuda Land Rights Committee, because again, the government of Antigua, in collaboration with West American business interests, trying to displace the people of Barbuda from their property. So I have Haiti, El Salvador, and also we have Dr. Ramzi Baroud, Palestinian author and activist, whose sister was just recently killed by Israeli bombing in Gaza. So those are the people who we have on the panel this evening. It's at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So I'm hoping if Brother Shabaka is available, he can hop on the thing. I think I sent you the Zoom link. But if not, I'll send it again.
I just sent it to her.
Right. So this is something that we like people to attend because it's very important that we understand this displacement of people, because part of the thing which we didn't get to discuss extensively is this doctrine of discovery does precisely that. It displaces people, right? The doctrine of terra nullius. And I also want to remind people that if they could get a copy of this book called Ceremonies of Possession, that deals with this whole approach to how the Europeans dispossess people of their land and their rights. So it's 6 o'clock this evening. Okay?
Good. We're way over time, 9:12. But we have to thank the security guard, Shane Flowers, our dynamic sister in XTV studio, Christy Flowers. Big thanks, Christy. And downstairs in Creme Radio, we have Larry Guerrero, known as Larry G. Remember, this show will repeat at 1:30 today. 1:30 at 4 o'clock. We have our Caribbean Dialogue and Haiti Action Committee gathering. We've been having them consistently since the year started. So they're asking for joining and share the link. XTV Belize YouTube, XTV Belize Facebook. Brother Shabaka, Kambon, enjoy the rest of your day, brother. Brother Akko. Only the people who save the people.
Save the people. Thank you, Brother Shabaka. Good seeing you.
All right, take care, brother.
Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master, talking about the help on the Belize and dollar, because patriots, all people who love them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. Country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another